Um, Welcome, everyone. I don't know if I'm on the screen yet. Hi, everyone. My name is Penny Lewis. I'm an associate professor of labor studies here at the Cuny School of Labor and Urban Studies, and I want to welcome you to our panel, Fighting for Cuny, Rebuilding New York City. Before I get started, I would like to thank the committee who helped bring together this event, which includes the panelists, of course, and as well as Irene Garcia-Matez, Sarah Hughes, Michael Lalonde, Steve London, Stephanie Luce, Michael Reimer, Patrick O'Donoghue, who with David Unger is right now working this morning to help bring questions from the audience to the panel. And I'd also like to thank Aaron Lechner, Michael Lalonde, Nadia Rahman, and Melanie Martinez, who've made it possible that we do this, with a special thanks to Melanie for handling this webcast right now. So I don't need to tell anyone who's watching this that New York faces unprecedented crises. The pandemic and mass unemployment have laid bare the racism, economic inequality, and leadership failures at multiple levels that together have made these crises possible to begin with. We pulled together this panel because we are also facing great potential losses here at the City University of New York. Threatened budget cuts have already meant the loss of jobs, with the possibility of more to come, and further erosion to already threadbare systems of student support across the university. In the coming period, we could face higher tuition, overstuffed classes, and insufficient investment in what is already too frequently the crumbling physical infrastructure of our campuses. It is a grim and enraging picture. But I'll say these past 2 weeks, things have felt different. And yes, the incredible success of our city's social solidarity in bringing down the death and disease rate is part of that. But it's the uprising movement for Black lives and the protests that have arisen in nearly every corner of the city and all over the country and the world that I think have lifted and changed our moods. We see in the brave and consistent and increasingly successful demands of the movement for racial justice, an end to police violence, defunding the police, and support for community investment, a real glimpse of another world that's possible. I think this week that we feel uplifted as we haven't for a long time. What this movement drives home is that the multiple systemic crises we face demand an overhaul in our priorities. We need to be rebuilding our city better than what we've had till now. These priorities must include the eradication of racist policing, new and equitable investments in public health, and of course, much more. Joining these and other pressing priorities, fully funding the City University of New York, especially at a time of crisis, is the best road through which New York will redress the inequalities and injustices that have ravaged our communities. CUNY is an opportunity generator for the working class, immigrant, and communities of color that it predominantly serves. It's an engine of individual and community development. It's a place where students and communities find lifelines to expanded creativity, critical perspectives, and better economic futures. In fact, study after study have proven the economic uplift that CUNY has provided to generations of its students. The panelists we'll hear from today will speak to the urgency of CUNY's mission and the role that it must play in realizing the better New York that we must create, and outline for us some of the steps that we can take individually and collectively to make it so. So we are delighted to have Steve Breyer, Jamel Henderson, Andrea Vasquez, and Justin Sanchez speaking with us this morning. I'm going to introduce them all now, and then each will speak for around 10 minutes, handing it off to the next speaker. And that should give us about 40 minutes for discussion and questions. As the slides prior to this talking indicated, you can ask questions by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be taking as many as possible after the panelists have spoken. So I will now introduce all of our panelists. First, we'll be hearing from Steve Breyer, who is a professor of urban education at the PhD program at the Cuny Graduate Center, and he also serves as a consortial faculty member here at SLU. A social and labor historian, Steve was the founding director of Cuny's American Social History Project and the co-author and co-producer of ASHP's multimedia curriculum, Who Built America, which is fantastic. He has published widely in a number of academic and popular venues on issues of race, class, and ethnicity in US labor and education history. His most recent book, co-authored with Mike Fabricant, is Austerity Blues, Fighting for the Soul of Public Higher Education. After Steve, we're going to be hearing from Jamel Henderson. Jamel is the coordinator of the Cuny Rising Alliance, and he is a proud 4-time graduate of City University of New York, receiving degrees from BMCC, Brooklyn College, Baruch College, and the Graduate Center. He is now a doctoral candidate in the inaugural EDD program in Community Partnership and Leadership at the College of Staten Island, which means he aims to become a historic 5-time CUNY graduate, which is fantastic. Jamel is also an adjunct professor at Brooklyn College, co-chair of the New York City chapter of Citizen Action of New York, and also the chair of Neighborhood Advisory Board number 8. Andrea Vasquez, who will be speaking after Jamel, is the first vice president of the Professional Staff Congress, which is the union that represents City University of New York faculty and staff. Before being elected to this position, she was the chapter chair for CUNY's Professional Staff Chapter of Higher Education Officers. In her regular CUNY job, Andrea is Associate Director of the American Social History Project Center for Media and Learning and Managing Director of the Graduate Center's New Media Lab. Andrea's most recent work at the ASHP was the producer of the CUNY Digital History Archive project. Finally, we are thrilled to be hearing from Justin Sanchez. Justin is the newly elected co-chair of the student union at the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies. He was born, raised, and educated in the Bronx, and Justin is now finishing his undergraduate degree at SLU. In addition to being a full-time student, Justin currently serves as the Deputy Director of External Affairs for the Bronx Borough President, and is actively involved in a number of local community organizations. So with that, we are going to get started and hear from Steve Breyer.
Thank you, Penny. If I'm coming up on the screen, I hope. Yeah, there I am. Thank you, Penny. What I want to do in my allotted 10 minutes today is highlight some of the milestones in struggles for racial, educational, and economic justice across the last century of CUNY's rich history. These struggles demonstrate the critical importance of student and faculty activism and militancy that has proven essential in the fight to save CUNY and rebuild New York City as a much more democratic and equitable society. What would become CUNY was begun in 1847 when New York City's citizens voted overwhelmingly to commit municipal tax dollars to create a tuition-free free academy, which would later become City College, to educate, in the words of the Free Academy's first leader, the children of the whole people. City College, open only to men, was followed in 1870 by the founding of the Normal School to educate women teachers, which would later be renamed Hunter College. As the city expanded dramatically after 1900, 2 tuition-free public universities proved insufficient. Public agitation pushed city politicians and business and education leaders to establish Brooklyn College in 1930 and Queens College in 1937. The city had managed, in the midst of the worst economic depression prior to the one we are now facing, to find the necessary tax dollars to underwrite 2 new tuition-free municipal colleges. In the aftermath of World War II, many states across the country expanded their existing state university and community college systems. New York City lagged far behind these efforts, however, because New York City was one of the last states to even establish a state-supported public university system. The city's 4 tuition-free municipal colleges could only educate a small fraction of New York City residents who desired college access in the post-war era. In 1961, New York City's political elites got the state to create and finally financially support a new municipal public university system called Cuny, encompassing the 4 original senior colleges and 3 newer community colleges. Access to Cuny, despite adding 8 new campuses over the decade of the 1960s, remained limited, however. Free tuition was clearly a boon to those admitted to Cuny, but the racial composition of the Cuny system remained overwhelmingly white and increasingly middle class throughout the 1960s. Limited Cuny access prevailed in the midst of major demographic shifts in the city's population, with the influx of nearly 1 million African Americans and Puerto Ricans in the city in the 1950s and 60s, replacing an almost equal number of white New Yorkers who left the city for the suburbs. As late as 1967, the overall Cuny student census was still 82% white, with only 10% of the student body Black and 3% Puerto Rican. This was in a year in which nearly half the students in New York City's public schools were Black and brown. With nationwide struggles for civil rights intensifying in the 1960s, Cuny administrators quickly realized they had to admit a larger number of Black and Puerto Rican high school graduates. Cuny's board finally agreed in 1966 to support an open admissions policy. The board, however, put off implementation of open access at Cuny until 1975, however. Students of color across the Cuny system, inspired in part by civil rights struggles and urban unrest, and by their embrace of Black power, ethnic pride, and grassroots activism, mobilized during the spring 1969 term. African American students, hold on one second. African American students and Puerto Rican students at CCNY were the first to demand that their college expand the newly formed SEEK program that supported students of color, create new programs emphasizing ethnic and racial identity and pride, and most importantly, dramatically increase the number of Black and Puerto Rican students admitted to Cuny. The CCNY students also built close ties to the surrounding Harlem community, even demanding that City College be renamed the University of Harlem. Black and Puerto Rican students, activists, along with white student allies and faculty members across the system, shut down many Cuny campuses for much of the spring 1969 term. By early summer, the Cuny board agreed to accelerate the implementation of open admissions to the next fall 1970 semester, 5 years ahead of schedule. All prior barriers and formal requirements for admission to Cuny were lifted, guaranteeing every New York high school graduate a place in a Cuny or senior or community college, regardless of class ranking. The the board's decision also assured entering students access to necessary remedial and support services, like SEEK on all Cuny campuses. The impact of Cuny's new open admissions policy was immediate and dramatic. By 1971, total Black and Puerto Rican student enrollment in Cuny's senior colleges increased to 24%, as contrasted to half that percentage a year earlier. By 1975, Cuny had created a far more racially and ethnically diverse student body of 253,000 undergraduates, a 55% increase in total enrollment since 1969, 30% of whom were white students as compared to 78% 6 years earlier. Cuny had also agreed to the creation of a series of Black and Puerto Rican studies programs and centers at various campuses, which contributed to the evolution of culturally responsive university curricula nationally. Cuny had thus put itself at the forefront of national efforts to make tuition-free and culturally responsive public college education available to any high school graduate, regardless of race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. Campus and community militancy and the building of broad political alliances led by students of color made this dramatic transformation of Cuny possible. Despite the students' decisive victory, the accelerated rollout of open admissions proved chaotic during the first years, with long registration lines, closed courses, insufficient classroom seats and textbooks, and campus turmoil sorry, lost my place here, at the newly opened campuses like the MCC, as we see here. While the Cuny administration had secured increased state operating and capital funds to expand Cuny's faculty and build new facilities, within a few years, Cuny was in crisis. Weighed down by consistent underfunding, crowded classrooms, and overworked faculty and staff, now defended by the newly formed PSC Cuny, the Faculty Staff Graduate Student Union. Despite the nation's early, the union's early contract successes, by 1974, adjunct faculty already comprised 1 in 3 teachers at Cuny, especially at the newer 4-year and community colleges. Hostos Community College in the South Bronx was one of the new Cuny campuses, which had been founded in 1969 in response to pressure from the Puerto Rican community for a bilingual Cuny campus during the open admissions struggle. Hostos opened in fall 1970, just as open admissions was being launched. The campus was hampered, however, by its woefully inadequate facilities, consisting of a single repurposed, abandoned 5-story factory. Beginning in 1973, students, staff, faculty, and members of the community the South Bronx community launched the Save Hostos movement, a multi-year campaign to obtain a much-needed second building for the campus. In spite of these local victories, Cuny's inspiring open admissions experiment was finally derailed by the city's 1976-77 fiscal crisis. The mayor announced massive layoffs of city workers, including at Cuny. In June 1976, the Cuny board agreed to impose tuition on full-time Cuny students for the first time in 130 years in exchange for a total state takeover of 4-year college finances. All capital construction at Cuny was halted. Almost 5,000 faculty and staff members were laid off. And several new Cuny campuses, including Hostos, were threatened with closure. A broad coalition of union, community, and student groups successfully mobilized the Hostos campus and surrounding community in 1976 to prevent the closing of the college. Members of the community coalition occupied one of Hostos's buildings in 1976 and again in 1977-78. The occupation succeeded in getting New York City, despite its intensifying fiscal crisis, to approve bonds for the full renovation of one of the buildings. The Save Hostos movement used a combination of militant tactics, including arrests, to attract widespread support from the residents of the communities served by the school. Despite the local victory of the Save Hostos movement, the city's broader decision to impose tuition and tighten admission standards at Cuny after 1977 dramatically eroded the underpinnings of the open admissions policy, with a sharp drop of 62,000 in the number of undergraduates enrolled at Cuny. 50% fewer Black and Latino freshmen were in Cuny's 1980 entering class as compared to 1977, with students of color increasingly shunted into Cuny's community colleges. Despite this huge setback, students and faculty continued to voice militant opposition to repeated tuition increases and budget and program cutbacks imposed by Democratic and Republican state and city governments in the 1980s and 1990s. When Democratic Governor Mario Cuomo, father of you-know-who, announced a $200 tuition increase in 1989, followed by a $53 million cut in CUNY's operating budget and a $500 tuition increase in 1991. Students at CUNY successfully mobilized launching a series of strikes and building occupations at 13 of CUNY's 20 campuses. In 1995, thousands of students and unionized workers rallied in Albany to oppose Republican Governor George Pataki's demand for a massive $116 million reduction in CUNY's operating budget, a $500 tuition increase, and total elimination of the Seek and College Discovery programs. As they had in 1989 and 1991 against Cuomo, CUNY students mobilized to oppose Pataki's frontal assault on CUNY, calling for marches, rallies, and hunger strikes across CUNY, which culminated in a 1995 march and mass rally at City Hall of 25,000 college and high school students, most of color. The rally ended in violent confrontations with the New York City police. Sound familiar? The effort to blunt Pataki's full-scale attacks on CUNY's budget in 1995 led to the creation of several ongoing student activist organizations, most notably the Student Liberation Action Movement, SLAM, which continually challenged the governor's next attempted budget cuts against CUNY over the next 5 years. Rudolph Giuliani soon launched his own assault on CUNY after he became mayor in 1994. Giuliani and his handpicked members of the CUNY board bluntly and publicly attacked CUNY for its failure as a public institution, belittling the educational achievements of CUNY's diverse student body and arguing CUNY was an institution adrift. Their particular target was the continued remedial support provided to entering students, many of color, at CUNY's senior colleges. This 1997 horror show themed image is typical of some of the innovative tactics employed by CUNY student groups in these years. And notice that already in 1997, Giuliani was a vampire. The mayor finally got his way in 1999 when remedial instruction at CUNY's senior colleges came to an end. As the 21st century dawned, CUNY had once again taken on the form of its pre-open admission self, a two-tier hierarchical and racially stratified system that it was increasingly starved of basic financial support by both the state and the city. What are the lessons to be learned from this breathless survey of more than 160 years of CUNY history? First and foremost, we must learn that the only way to sustain and build CUNY as a beacon for all the city's beleaguered working class residents is to be willing to fight to protect and expand it. As Frederick Douglass aptly noted in 1857, quote, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will," unquote. I would only add that beyond making the demand, we need to be willing to struggle and fight to win that demand. This brings us to the current fight to save CUNY. I will pass the torch now to Jamel Henderson, coordinator of CUNY Rising, to describe what is happening in this moment. Thank you.
All right. Good morning to all of you and happy Thursday and day whatever triple digit number we're in of COVID, of pandemic. I hope you all are safe. I hope you all are well. My name is Jamel Henderson. As stated, I am honored to serve as the CUNY Rising Alliance coordinator and as well as the adjunct professor at one of my 4 alma maters, Brooklyn College. So hopefully Brooklyn College is in the house. let me get to my screen. But before I get to that, I want to tell you how important education is to me. One of my heroes that I look to, who is one of the greatest orators of all time, in my opinion, the late Malcolm X. He said, and I have the quote right here in front of my desk. It says, "Education is your passport to the future. For tomorrow belongs to the people who prepare for it today." Each and every morning when I'm here at work in my office space that I created, I look at that quote because I think about all of the students that are currently seeking higher education right now in the midst of this pandemic. But the pandemic had to be shadowed by the ongoing epidemic that people like me are constantly dealing with. And so now we have to come together and fight even harder for all of those who have fallen by individuals who hate themselves so much that they have to release it out on us. And so I want to share with you all a little bit about the work of Cuny Rising. So I'm gonna get my screen set up. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Hopefully it's coming up. Wonderful. From the beginning. Oh, okay. There we go. From the beginning. Awesome. So as it loads up, hopefully it's coming up. There we go. So this is the Cuny Rising Alliance, and this is our brand new logo that we created, kicking off 2020. We find this to be very, very powerful because we are focused on education, but we also know that education is a right for everyone, and the fist in the background symbolizes that universal fight for everyone to have access to quality, free higher education here in the city of New York. You hear a lot of elected officials say, education is the key to success. And one of the things I say at every protest is that if education is truly the key, stop giving CUNY a rusted key. You can't turn the keys to opening the doors into education if that key is rusty. I don't know about you. I've had a rusted key before. It doesn't work. Okay? So this is Cuny Rising Alliance, our website, cunyrisingalliance.org. Here's our mission and vision. Let me just scoot this over. Cuny Rising Alliance was formed in 2015 in response to the university's crisis. It has brought together students, workers, and communities under one banner to fight for a CUNY that gives communities and students what they deserve: access and to quality higher education. Hercules Reed was the original task force leader, working with city and PSC and many others working on creating this task force. Then it was preceded by Yael Shafritz, who many of you all worked with, proud alum of Brooklyn College, and now I'm honored to carry the banner from them. Rhetoric about CUNY's radical history is not enough. The state, city, and CUNY itself must no longer let down its founding promise. We are building the movement to hold CUNY accountable and to demand the state and city fully invest in higher education so communities across New York City get the education they need and deserve. One of the things that I've said, especially in this crisis, that the university must aggressively be funded, because the class of 2020 could be helping the frontline workers right now, getting into hospitals, getting into any medical fields, into the scientific fields, to where they are studying the different chemicals, the different viruses to create a cure and or a vaccination. And so we have to make sure that we aggressively tell the city and state governments to invest in the university, because we are the driving force for New York's economy, right? We are the greatest urban university in the world, but most importantly, what makes this university so special, unlike any other university, is that when we walk off of our campuses, we deal with New York directly. It's not like University of Albany or any of these private colleges where it's 20 miles to the city. You're getting the reality right there. So you're hearing sirens right outside in the middle of you teaching, you're hearing yelling and screaming, and that's the essence of our city, because despite all of that, we push forward and we want everyone to have that opportunity. So these are some of the members of our alliance. We're growing. So if, we're always looking to expand, because we believe, and I told the members of our alliance that we are going to create a win-win world. We know that each organization has their own different agenda. Thank you. We have their own different agenda, but at the same time, we also know that we are all under one banner, which is high quality education. Like education, period, across the city. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what income you look like. Everyone should have the equal access to higher education. It's a simple form, but I know if some of my math professors out there, you think the formula is so simple, but you got to take the time studying over and over again. Hopefully you get it right with the right person. So these are some of our organizations that we're part of. As mentioned, I'm a 4-time graduate of the City University of New York, receiving degrees from the Borough of Manhattan Community College, Brooklyn College, Baruch, the Graduate Center, and now beginning my journey at the College of Staten Island. So CSI, if you're in here, I'm glad to be a student once again with you. And this journey began in 2004. So one of the things we focus on is the real CUNY experience, because one of the things that we've been hearing is a lot of these great reports from US News and World Reports, USA Today, how wonderfully diverse and affordable like CUNY is and how beautiful our campuses are. But what they don't tell you is what's the real deal behind all of those experiences. It looks good on paper, but the students, like you're seeing in this picture here, live in communities are in New York City that are really dealing with challenges that nobody's talking about. And our alliance is bringing that truth to life. So what is the real CUNY experience? It is the experience behind the experience, meaning you're taking the time to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Of students, faculty, staff, and alums of this university have to deal with on a daily basis, surviving while pursuing a higher education. It is our most powerful tool that gives the voice of students to represent thousands who shared a similar experiences while in CUNY, from infrastructure to safety, from tuition to resources. When the CUNY community speaks, it counters the mirage that the CUNY administration, state, and city leadership likes to consistently display to the world. And that is something that we constantly share. So whenever the chancellor like to drop something, boom, students are telling, no, that's not true. We phenomenal examples was the Excelsior Scholarship. We work closely with the University Student Senate and NYPIRG and PSC to really debunk that. And we're going to continue to debunk that, because you see that this governor is currently preparing to reimagine what learning looks like by constantly having it in this spaces like this. And certain communities are culturally designed to be together to uplift each other. Some of our signature events, our phenomenal Student Power Summit, which we began last year at City Tech, which was wonderfully made and turned out. Over 110 students came out. Professor Breyer did a phenomenal workshop on understanding the real CUNY story, and we're going to continue to take that on the road, brother, because City doesn't know what the real story behind CUNY is. And then we take the real CUNY experience town hall editions and the CUNY crisis during COVID town hall. So we're constantly doing town halls, we're doing marches. Of course, we're working with all of our organizations and really bringing awareness to the fight. We currently have a petition out right now. It has over 1,100 signatures, where we're calling on the state leadership to do their job and to really fund for CUNY. These are some of our demands. As you can see, we're looking for everything to be upgraded. It's simple as that. Right now, especially in this climate, we want to make sure that our students are safe. We want to make sure that our schools are sanitized. We want to make sure that our schools are affordable. We want to make sure that the 25% or more that were cut by adjuncts are returned, because we know that full-time faculty are going to be extremely overwhelmed by the influx of students that's going to be in their classrooms. We want to make sure that we get to that goal of having part-time professors, adjuncts, reach $7,000. We made a great accomplishment, but we know we have to keep pushing. And this is a state that if you push, change will happen. I want to close with this as I stop sharing my screen, how personal this is for me, because like you said, Penelope, the times have changed. And when I'm walking outside those doors, they don't see a professor. They don't see an organizer. They see a Black man. And I can't be more real than this, because I love this university and I know what this university has done for me. And I know that the reality is there are thousands of Black and brown students right now who are out there marching and putting their lives on the line just to coexist. And we have to honor and fight for them. And so I'm going to continue to be in this fight. I'm going to continue to push, because one of the things that I want to share with you all, and I think if I can just want to share how serious this is with me, if I could just share my screen once again very quickly. Can you see it? Can everyone see? Like, this was me 2 weeks ago. I was out there on the front lines, and I was standing in solidarity with Tim Hunter, who's the chair of USS, and many other student leaders, and I got caught out there. And in that moment, they took me down. But thankfully, I'm okay. Everything is fine. I am well, and I'm going to stop sharing. But I just want you all to know that every person, every community organizer, every person that lives in our city, from the Upper East Side to Brownsville, from Bedford Park to Coney Island, deserves the opportunity to get a free education. And I want them to break records just like I am, and we can continue to make awareness of our university. So I just want to say thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
And next we'll hear from Andrea Vasquez.
Oh, my apologies. I'm supposed to introduce her. So sorry. Next, we have my good colleague who I love so much, Andrea Vasquez, who's the first vice president of PSC. She is an amazing leader, professor, but she just cares about this university. She has such a motherly but yet stern power about her. And those who know Andrea, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm looking forward to hearing from her. So let's hear from her. Let's give her a big round of applause virtually.
That was much more than you were supposed to say, but thank you. Thanks, Jamel. It was great hearing you too. And thank you to everyone at SLU for holding this really important event. It's great to be here and speak at this pivotal historical moment. I'll speak a little bit and then show some images of recent activities at the end. As unions and community-based organizations, I believe that what we choose to do and not do in the next few months might be more significant than any other 3-month period in decades. I'll say a few words about the City University of New York before and after COVID, and about what our 30,000 member Professional Staff Congress Union has been up to with other unions and allies. And I'll also look forward to talking about where we go from here together. As many of you know, CUNY serves 260,000 degree-seeking students. They are 76% people of color, they speak hundreds of languages, and 50% of our students are from families with incomes of under $30,000 a year. Over 65% of New York's public high school graduates attend CUNY. Over the past 10 years alone, CUNY's state funding has decreased by 18% adjusted for inflation. The institution has simply been starved for funds. At CUNY, we now have 4,000 fewer full-time faculty than we had in the 1970s, with 30,000 more students. These decades of severe intentional underfunding represent an unequal and racist disinvestment and disregard for our students' futures. 73% of CUNY funding comes from New York State, and their disinvestment has said to our students that Black lives do not matter, that brown lives do not matter, and that poor students do not matter. Our union and others in New York State have been fighting these budgetary shortfalls for decades, but here we are. And with COVID and a governor who has gained more and more control of the state budget while refusing to raise taxes on the wealthy, the path to a better CUNY seems frightfully longer and steeper. Since the COVID-19 crisis began, our members, our students, our surrounding CUNY communities, and our quality education have all suffered severe blows in several ways. The public health crisis hit hard on the lives and futures of CUNY's Black and brown students and their families. The funding crisis is being used as a means to bolster the harmful funding structures that support austerity education. The escalation of police violence has highlighted the obstacles our students confront on a daily basis. And those who wish to further corporatize public education are licking their chops at the opportunity to further cheapen students' education by increasing their reliance on fully online courses while increasing class size. It's clear that this harms those who have the fewest resources and the fewest academic skills. And sadly, on top of all that, CUNY has made a mark for itself because of the speed with which they alone, among New York City's agencies and public institutions, have announced a hiring freeze, massive layoffs of adjunct faculty and other part-timers, and cuts to programs, even before the governor announced a single budget cut, and even before funds designated in the CARES Act to save jobs were received. So it's been a fight every step of the way to get our administration to do the right thing. In mid-March, the union spent many weeks demanding that Cuny allow the approximately 7,000 professional staff, mostly women and the most racially diverse sector of our membership, to work remotely. Threats and announcements of layoffs and programmatic cuts followed, as did asking union members to rescind appointments of other union members. There have been too many issues to name here, but members of our union have never been as engaged and active as they are today. Under the call to save lives, save jobs, save Cuny, we've begun impact bargaining with Cuny over the new terms and conditions of work. We've built health and safety committees of professional staff and librarians and others, and we've organized department chairs who've sometimes been expected to deliver those layoff notices to their fellow union members. We've built or expanded already existing campus-based cross-title committees of rank and file workers, and we've held numerous public demonstrations, a caravan, pickets in front of Cuny, and a series of Fight Back Friday events. Tomorrow, in fact, we're holding a press conference with supporters in the state legislature, as well as some city elected. So we hope you can go there. I think I gave the link earlier, maybe we could show it later. And on June 23rd, we'll have another action in the late afternoon, so please stay tuned. That will also focus on the cuts and layoffs at Cuny. So as part of a larger strategy to fund higher education, support the return to no tuition, as Steve described, no cuts, no layoffs, use short-term federal loans, and put in place a fair tax structure to bring in new revenue directly to the public good. From rank and file members to members at every level of leadership, we're listening to each other and to our students who've taken to the streets. We support them, we join them, and we're hearing them, and we're fighting for them and with them. But we also must be asking ourselves, what can we do? What must we do? And what must we do differently as unions and community organizations to meet the needs of this moment, to build the power we need to see the seismic shift in how our institutions are funded and function to serve the public good? I believe we'll only succeed if we broaden our coalitions and join with others in labor, with students, and with community and organizational allies. We have existing labor and community allies that have grown stronger in this period, and we must continue to build them. So I'll say a little bit about that. PSC has been working with a coalition of unions and community groups to press legislators to support new taxation of the billionaires and ultramillionaires. I have a slide on that I can show you later. I'll focus on the union work since you just heard from Jamel about our work with students and other organizations. 2 weeks ago, 7 unions signed a letter to Speaker Carl Hastie, Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, and those unions were CWA, NYC, DC 37, UAW, NYSNA, the nurses, RWDSU, and PEF, Public Employee Federation. The letter spoke to the inequalities surrounding us and how we cannot stand by and watch this violence and inequality as it kills any hope for a more just future, especially for Black and Brown communities. This past week, we agreed and signed on to a statement of principles that we're looking to expand and get sign-ons from many other unions and then reach out to community-based organizations. The statement also pushes for a major shift in priorities that are reflected in budgets, and we're surely hearing now how budgets must shift to support communities of color. And supporting Cuny is, of course, supporting Black and Brown communities, so we always try to make that connection. In all our efforts, we have to continue to escalate in direct proportion to the threats we face. We need stronger and stronger actions and joint actions among unions and communities. We hold the power of our numbers. We need to grow and use that power. You tell me, but I think unions represent around 21% of New York City workers, and although we've released statements, made joint statements, and held press conferences, we've certainly not cracked the fundamental inequality and racism inherent in the underfunding of public education and other public goods and services. We must seek to do better together. Thank you. So now I'd like to just quickly try to show you a few images of some recent activities. Let's see, I have to get to share screen, right? Is that working? Okay, now maybe you can still hear me, so I'll start right here. This was Lisette Colon from Hostos Community College in front of Cuny's office. I'll just show you just to see some of the things. People made their own signs because our staff is not on the job. They're not in the streets. We haven't called them out. I mean, sometimes they come, but we're not back in the office, so they picketed Cuny, and we had a simultaneous Zoom effort where we all tweeted at the same time, and one of the people at the demonstration actually was a Zoom participant, And she showed us what was going on, and we all held up signs and tweeted in support. So that was pretty cool. Here's someone else commenting when we shared one of the images. So it became kind of an interactive. It was pretty good for a union like ours to be able to do this techie thing together. That's your own, Lynn Turner. I don't know if you recognize her. She's a graduate student. There's our President Bowen. The group together in front of Cuny. This is one of the Cuny Rising Alliance activities, actually, where they organized a press conference that was really successful. Michael Kink is from the Budget Justice Coalition, and he's really worked closely with us on dealing with all of the taxes that we're fighting for together. This is our caravan that we held. It was about a few weeks ago, and that's my car right there up in the front. That's another car we did. I learned this from my experience in Albany with the Budget Justice Coalition. They had a caravan first, and it was fun. It was good. We weren't near each other. It was safe. That's my car again. That's John Liu, Senator John Liu, who joined us on bike, and he did a great video for us. He's a real ally. There's our bikers, some of our Ulus. Okay, I'm wrapping it up. Great. And this, I'll end with this one to show you how sophisticated a look a union leader can have. That's me as I was preparing to go. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much. And I look forward to talking to you more.
And next, we're going to hear from Justin Sanchez.
I forgot.
Can you hear me? Good. Alrighty. Hey guys, it was really wonderful to hear from all of you. My name is Justin Sanchez. I am the co-chair of the SLU Student Union. But I really would like to take this time to talk more about the students at SLU. And I want to really paint a broad brushstroke of what it's like to be in class. So I'm just going to focus on one of my classes this semester, my Labor Politics 303 class, and just talk about a little bit of the students and the teachers. We only have like 8 students in the class, so it's very easy to get to know everyone very quickly. But think about who is in our classes. We had Yendi. She is a worker for the Department of Education, a fierce advocate for families, holding down a full-time job while also a full-time student. You had Mark. He was a caller for 311, one of the most dedicated and nicest people you will ever meet, also holding down a full-time job and a full-time student. You have Wanda, who is a mom, a union member, a pastor, holding down multiple full-time jobs and also a full-time student, and just graduated this semester. You have Monique, my sister from another mister, who is works for DOT, holds down a full-time job, full-time student. And then you have our professor, Camille Rivera. She is an activist, an organizer. She's a mom. She had all of this knowledge, and this is what a classroom looks like at SLU. It's all of the frontline essential workers that are holding down full-time jobs, but also are full-time students trying to better their lives and making sure that, Black and brown people get an education. But I think this is important to understand because it's common knowledge that with the passage of Citizens United, we are under attack by so many different things from so many different levels. And it's not only that we're an attack on the political system, but there's also been an attack on academia. You have to understand that these folks have taken the systems in place and have infiltrated at every single level, to the point where there's even major curricula out there like law and economics that is essentially put in there by these like crazy conservative, misguided right-wing folks. And the people on the front lines of those are our CUNY professors. In order to stop that, what that infiltration in our academic realm and understanding, our CUNY professors and our students are on the front lines of those. And they're on the front lines of protecting the city. And, they have a history of fighting back. And CUNY herself has a history of fighting back. And as a Bronxite, as someone who still lives in the South Bronx, I hold the fight for Hostos really near and dear to my heart. I think we need to understand it was a combination of things. We had letter writing campaigns, mass demonstrations, takeovers of buildings, things that we can't do in COVID right now. But even with all of that, I think it is super important to understand that even with all of that, the Board of Higher Education voted to cut Hostos anyway. It didn't work. What worked was that a combination of that, but then luckily, by some miracle, a few Bronx legislators were able to add a provision to the budget, to the state budget, to keep Hostos open. So I think this is important because it shows that we need our allies in government. And right now, the executive is not our ally. I mean, think about it this way. The Cuomo administration, quote unquote, verbatim said, the middle of a public health crisis is not the time to be raising taxes. So as a student, let's go back and look through history and see if we've done that. You know, it's something that I just did in my intro to social and economic policy class at SLU anyway. So 1918, we had 12,000 people die in New York City from the Spanish flu. The health department closed schools and theaters. And then 1919, New York State itself starts the personal income tax. So boom, all right. Taxes were then cut after the war and then steadily increased until they peaked in the 1970s. Well, what happened during those increases in the 1970s? Well, we had a smallpox outbreak, so another public health crisis. Then they fell until 1977, and then the Great Recession hit. And then in 2009, swine flu hit. And what was the response? Oh, they passed a millionaire's tax. So there is a legit history of raising taxes in times of public health crisis. So pretty much, excuse my French, but stop bullshitting us. It's not the truth. Like, the history speaks for itself. And if you consider the budget a statement of morals, like I do, and you're out here saying that you believe that Black Lives Matter, and you know that a majority of our students at Cuny are Black and brown lives, then educate Black lives, nourish Black lives, give Black and brown lives the opportunity, the promise of opportunity that we deserve. You know, our parents, our grandparents came here to this city to give us, their children, the opportunity, that promise of opportunity. And we're consistently being undercut at every single level all the time by the people that are supposed to be watching out for us. And so I really implore all of our elected officials, the union members, you know, if you believe that Black Lives Matter, then commit to fully funding Cuny. It's one of the ways that, you know, we're going to close the Black-white wealth gap. It's one of the ways that we're going to be able to fix a lot of the social problems if you give us the opportunity that we need to succeed. I think one of the things that we need to also look at is, you know, there are bills out there that we need to be rallying around and supporting. Senator Ramos has a billionaire's tax bill that will add a lot of funding that we desperately need to make sure that we don't need to close funding. And if the executive doesn't want to put that on the agenda, well, we have seen right now, as we're passing great reform, that our assembly and Senate chambers can come together and override anything that the governor really wants to do. I mean, to a certain extent. So then, you know, reach out to those legislators, use our potential allies, you know, Natalia Fernandez, an assembly member, Diana Richardson, Jamal Bailey, those people are on our side, getting a, making sure that we're fighting to get the maintenance of effort bill that was stalled in 2011 finally passed. Like, there should be no reason that cuts need to be made anymore. And, you know, in order to keep pushing this, you have to go to the source. You know, call Deborah Glick's office. She's the chair of higher education. Call the people that are actually making decisions at these tables and make your voices heard. It's the only way that we're going to do all of this, because we can scream and shout through the windows all we want, but we need people that have seats at that table. So if they don't want to give us a seat, we have to pull it out. And yeah, with that, I'm done.
Justin, thank you. And thanks to everybody on the panel. I'm not sure if I'm back on the screen or just a disembodied voice right now. What a fantastic panel, and we so appreciate hearing from all of you, from all the perspectives that you're bringing to this fight for CUNY. Before we get started with questions, am I on the screen? I don't think I am. But before we get started with questions, I wanted to give the panelists an opportunity to comment very briefly on anything you just heard anyone else say, you know, if you had any just reactions or questions, if any of you do. So I can't, if you all could come back on so I can see you all, and maybe we will all see each other, I'm not sure. Justin, Andrea, Steve.
I can talk, but I can't, you know, get on screen. There we go. All right.
There you are. You know, we are all adjusting to this crazy Zoom world, and it is a rocky road.
Loud back on video, so that was, we are now.
Just a quick fun fact, 10 years ago, Skype was the wave, as well as Ubu, but it wasn't used for this purpose. So it's funny, 10 years later, here we are using it for professional and business purposes. Who would have ever thought?
Who would have thunk? So let me ask everyone, does anybody, again, very briefly, because we've gotten actually a bunch of questions in from the audience and I want to get to them, but does anyone have like any 1 minute thing they want to say to, you know, anyone else who is, anything else anyone said? Steve looks like he has something to say.
I'm struck listening to everyone who followed me at all levels, the sort of the continuity and the depressing continuity. All the issues remain exactly the same in some way as at CUNY as they have over the last 30, 40 years. And I'm struck by the tenacity of students, faculty, and staff at fighting to defend the institution, but also it's a little bit like a broken record because the forces that control, the elites that control politics and the economy seem never, ever to understand the basic point that Jamel made, that Justin made, that Andrea made about what's needed to keep this incredibly important working class institution afloat and thriving. And it both, I've been at CUNY 40 years, it both depresses me and inspires me at the same time.
I just want to say very quickly, Steve, I mean, you're on fire. Between you and one of my personal academic mentors, I don't know if she's on, Dr. Jean Theo Harris, it's like you guys are really leading the way and teaching the truth. And I kind of want to foreshadow our vision that I think we as the Alliance are doing, because we've been talking about this, but we need to take that to the road. The city does not know that truth of the real story behind CUNY. And especially in this climate, like I'm seeing all the never before seen articles and I'm like infatuated. I feel like I'm in class already, like keep going, you know? And I think we need more of that. So I hope that if there's any professors out there that are interested in working, you know, with us on that, please, I'm gonna put my email right now. Please send me an email because we need to take this movement to the road and teach the city and what's really happening. So I just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Jamel. And Andrea, briefly, yes.
Yeah, just picking up on what Steve said, I also think it was great to hear from everyone. I had the same feeling. We each sort of filled in a piece of history and a piece of what's needed right now. Like Justin talking about the taxes was great. You know, I think it's really what makes this a pivotal moment is, you know, it is CUNY. We all care about CUNY, but it's really the moment when we are fighting for public institutions and for public money to go to the public good. And we've got to get that money out of the super wealthy. It's just, this is a moment when we're trying desperately to make that shift. And it, as Justin pointed out, it's happened in the past, but this crisis, these many crises that we're seeing, I guess we have to just hope that we can make some significant changes in the months to come.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, everybody. So I'm going to ask the first batch of questions, and you can let me know if you want to say something. And Justin, I'm going to call on you first in case you did want to say something. But let me just ask these questions. So one person wrote, I remember when CUNY was tuition free. If there is student debt, it is due to high tuition. Why not eliminate student debt by making CUNY tuition free once again? Someone else points out, it seems that CUNY has always been struggling with the city and state for funding, which is what you guys all just talked about. Are there other public higher educational systems that struggle in the same way? Might this struggle be linked to the racial composition of our university? Again, comment and question, and we can think about that. Finally, how do we make the connection between the current movement for Black lives and the need for fully funded free college education? So I put those together because they're all kind of getting to this nexus of you know, the vision that I think many of you spoke to. You know, how we combine the major protests that we're facing and the major movements that we're a part of now with our struggle for CUNY. And then finally, how do we usefully collaborate with students in documenting their experiences so that we can improve their experiences? So I throw those questions out to you all, and maybe you guys can take some turns answering parts of them. Justin, you should go first.
Sure. Well, I think it's something that I was speaking to before, specifically about how do you link the movements. Well, I think you link the movements by showing, you know, what fully funding CUNY does for Black and Brown lives. And if you believe that Black Lives Matter, then if you're not supporting the advancement of Black and Brown lives, then you're kind of, excuse my French again, bullshitting us. So like, put your money where your mouth is. And if you believe that Black Lives Matter, put money towards educating Black and Brown lives. And if that's happening at CUNY, then fully fund CUNY. I don't understand what is so hard about that. Like, everyone says that education, you know, growing up, education is how you get ahead. Education is how you move forward. Well, we're here getting educated. We're trying to move forward, but the institution itself is making it harder. So do you actually believe that education is the way forward? And if that is the case, then why are you denying access to the very people that you so claim that you care about and that you're seeing? Well, see us, we're talking to you, and fund us.
I would
Jamel
say,
and Steve.
yes, I would say to all those who are watching how to really get involved and understand what we're dealing with. Think about the students that look like me that you've taught, that have gone above and beyond in your class. Think about those students that look like me, who you know that when they walk off their campuses, they are struggling. You see them as you're going to your local train station, your bus, your corner store, your bodega, whatever it is, you see them. And in spite of their situations, they're still going above and beyond. Those are the stories that the public needs to hear. Those are the stories that the public needs to hear, because it channels me that in spite all of our situations, despite whatever societal challenges are thrown at us, we have the genetic capability to consistently push back. I mean, it can't get realer than that. Like, I live in NYC and I accomplish all of this that I share. And there are thousands of Black and Brown students that look just like me, who live in situations like mine, or even homeless, and they're still going above and beyond. And the administration likes to overshadow those stories by putting all the Fulbright scholars and the Truman scholars, and that's cute, but that's not New York City. That's not the real New York story. And when we want to see those ads, we want to see those presentations that show Black and Brown faces, that really shows what this university is about. That it isn't going to be easy. And, you know, Justin, you know, we've got some of the toughest professors in our university, you know, but it's not going to be easy. But if you give us the opportunity, you see us, we will go above and beyond. We give back. And so I think that's the awareness that we need.
I want to jump in real quick as well, because it's not only what CUNY does for the students, but there are also so many programs that CUNY does for the community, especially in my community in the South Bronx. Like, there are a lot of immigrant families that need help, and CUNY is doing services like Immigration Now, where they're going into elected offices, helping people getting their documentation put together. And when you're cutting CUNY, you're cutting those programs too. So then you're cutting, then if you're saying that immigrants matter and refugees matter, put your money where your mouth is, because CUNY is helping to bring those communities to the forefront. And so if you are cutting CUNY, you're cutting everything that you're saying that you truly believe in. So either you believe in it or you don't. And if you do believe in it, then put your money where your mouth is. That's what a budget is. That is a moral statement, like it's a statement of morals. And I think those are things that also don't get spoken about, or how much within the community that CUNY also does, that is not just educating folks, it's literally building community and building our city. So if you're defunding CUNY, you're defunding the very vital programs that are making our city run.
They are essential community hubs.
Right.
That's right. Thank you.
I want to pick up on the first question you posed, Penny, about free tuition, which I support. Obviously, everybody on this call and panel supports it, but I want to make the argument that free tuition is a necessary but not sufficient reform that we need. CUNY needs much more than free tuition. The reason I spent so much time talking about the period in my presentation from 1960 to the open admissions struggle, from CUNY founding to then, we had free tuition at CUNY, and yet because of other issues and structures, the system remains still overwhelmingly white and middle class. So what we need to do, what the students raised, was not just keep tuition free. They raised fundamental questions when they went out in the streets and took over their campuses in 1969 to change the curriculum, to increase the number of students of color who were coming into the system, and to change the admissions requirements. So what we need to do is not only fight for free tuition, but fight for support for working class and poor students to attend CUNY, coming from places like NYCHA that Jamel talked about. They need transportation expenses. They need to pay for books. We have food insecure students, many of them across the CUNY system. We need money and support for that. So free tuition is a start, but it's not the end of what we need to do. And I just want to make sure we always keep our eyes on that larger prize.
Go ahead, Andrea. Yeah.
Just a quick thing that I think we need to say at some point today, so I want to say it now, is the census, filling out the census. And I think in the union, we're going to be trying for 100% participation. I'm sure that students are involved in some ways, and maybe SLU is as well, but I think we just have to be talking about it, because that obviously affects our funding for 10 years to come, affects our communities for 10 years to come. So let's do that. And also just on the getting CUNY out there, you know, one of the things a union can do is run ads, and we ran a TV ad a couple of weeks ago, and we revised it, and we're running another one now in the wake of all of the actions in the streets. So look for it probably early next week. That's it. I'll wait for other questions.
Great, thanks, Andrea. Another thing that has come up is this question of coalition building here in New York. I mean, I think each of us recognize the deep connections that we have to the struggles around us. And I think hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers support CUNY. But, you know, how are we going to best generalize this sense, you know, this need, this demand for not just our public institution, but all public institutions? And you know, so some of this is directed at you, Andrea, like what are the steps inside of the labor movement that we think, you know, we could be helping to take? What are some of the challenges we face? How can we best ally with other community organizations that are fighting for public institutions? And then how can we also draw those institutions into what we do? And I think, Jamel, you could probably speak a lot to that in your experience with CUNY Rising.
Well, it's, you know, we've been working with, as I mentioned, a group of unions. And I have to say, you know, it's been really hard at CUNY, but it has been a lot harder at many other unions. And people have been suffering and dying and going to work on dangerous jobs every day. Many of us have been working at home and are able to work at home, as we know, others can't. I mean, even at CUNY, we had a fight over who was essential, but it's been really hard for unions. It is tragic. It's not just hard, it's tragic in many cases. So when we say, let's go to the streets, or unions should come out in the streets, which, you know, I think it's great to be out, but it's dangerous to be out. there is no vaccine right now. So it's a really tricky balance between, you know, being delighted that our students are out in the street, and many of us are out in the street, but you know, we've got to be careful. This is our lives. These are our families' lives. We've lost too many people already. So it's kind of a delicate conversation, the likes of which we really haven't seen before. It was easier in the past to say, you know, all the unions should blah, 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 or like even after the Janus decision, you remember the PSC was the union to call a demonstration, and all these other unions came down to City Hall or somewhere down there. And it was, you know, it was easy. Everybody just showed up. It's really much trickier right now, but I certainly think that we have built stronger relationships because of this crisis. And as I said earlier, you know, we do have to figure out ways to work together and support each other, and hopefully be able to come out in the streets together safely, and masked and all of that. It's a different kind of demonstration. It's a different kind of action now, but I think we can do that, and I think we need to do that.
Andrea, can I just ask you a quick follow-up to that? What about SUNY? What's our relationship to SUNY, and to what extent can the Cuny and SUNY fights be linked?
Well, we have
that came in.
They always have been linked budgetarily every year. And, you know, and the fact of the matter is, in Albany, CUNY's not going to get anything if SUNY doesn't get the equivalent. And, you know, Steve can talk a little bit more about that. But so we've always been linked in terms of the legislative work in Albany, fighting for funding, the TAP gap fight, filling the TAP gap, which was a big, you know, we went pretty far last year, and we thought we were going to really get some money this year, and then all of this stuff hit. But that was very much a CUNY-SUNY alliance. And on these letters, and, you know, we're all under NYCET. And frankly, NYCET has stepped up in ways that we have not seen before in the last couple of months. NYCET is the parent organization. So I think there are like over 1 million teachers in New York State in NYCET. So when they have calls, I did a panel yesterday with a group called Labor Religion Coalition. And there were public school teachers from small towns upstate, and Fred Cole, the head of the UUP, was on it. They have different issues than we do. They think they can return to school safely, I think, in the fall somehow. But, you know, we've been on the same page, but the PSC is known as one of the more active and one of the most progressive unions. There are others that we're working closely with, but I think the trick now is to really find things that we can unite around. They won't agree with every position the PSC takes, and we may disagree or think we could think of better language in the sign-on letter. Maybe PSC would have said it this way or that way, but when you work in coalition, you're making a compromise, and for that language and for that unity. So the things that Justin mentioned, the struggle around 3 bills, there were 3 specific ways of taxing that we all agreed on, and that was really a big deal. For everyone, for NYCET to stand for all the state unions and say we're going to fight for the billionaires tax, the ultra millionaires tax, and the pied-à-terre tax. There's many other bills, and those 3 might not be the 3 that make it through. But the fact that there's different people fighting for all this new revenue, and as we know, most New Yorkers want to see the wealthy taxed. It's a fact. It's like huge, 70%, 90%, something like that. So in every different, you know, formation, I think any time that we could unite around some parts of that is helpful.
Thank you. Jamel, did you have anything you wanted to throw in there? And I think you're muted.
Yes, I would just say that as we looking to build coalitions, you know, one of the things I've shared is that on studying different coalition buildings is that sometimes, you know, organizations can tend to kind of butt with each other. I try to welcome a win-win strategy because the overarching goal is higher education. Like, I don't care if PSC is doing one thing, if DC 37 is doing another thing. If it's in the name of higher education, we're all a part of it. And we have to consistently put it out there that way, because this is not the time to be like, oh, well, PSC is always out there and Nyberg's always, no, we're all winning. We're all, and that's the alliance. We're under, like, we have to be under that one banner that we're all constantly pushing and pursuing together. And then when you're reaching out to different organizations, speak the truth of what it is you're bringing, right? Because sometimes people can get a little finicky as to what they want to share, or the goals that they want to provide. No, you know what's going on. You see and understand the climate better than anyone. Bring it out to the forefront and what changes you want to have, because this is 2020, right? This is a year and a kickoff to a decade where I don't know if anybody been to Atlantic City, but you got to go all in. And that's some of the things that we're looking for, you know, and some of the things that we're getting ready to work on. You know, this is about going all in for education, right? All in for education, because it is a K to college pipeline in New York City. The same way public schools are a community hub, Cuny is a community hub for so many people. And there are organizations that are based in Cuny campuses that use Cuny classrooms as their space of organizing to go back out there into those spaces. So we need to reach out to them and offer whatever we can to be in support of them, and how we can be a stand for them and create a universal win-win strategy.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really distinguishes most of the folks I know who work at Cuny, who teach at Cuny, who go to school at Cuny, is the number of hats everybody wears. And I feel like the extent to which we all recognize that we are like community leaders, you know, by morning, students by night, you know, in the parent associations on the weekends, like drawing together very consciously those connections, both as individuals and communities, I mean, and collectively, I think would really strengthen the work we do. Sorry, go ahead, Jamel.
No, very quickly, you're on point with that. And that's something that as faculty members, we all must share, right? You heard some of the stuff I do outside of me being an adjunct professor. Like I teach, I coach, I train. Like you got to share those stories, because that's what makes us so strong, right? No other professors in any other universities have to do that, you know? I don't know, Columbia colleagues, whoever, wherever, their private school, there's a different entity, a different setting. They do their class, they relax with their families, right? We all do our classes, then what? We got to pick up the laundry. We gotta go to after school. We got to attend the community board meeting. We got to chair an organized meeting. And in spite of all of that, look at what we accomplished, and still teaching the students in our university to go out there and be great. That is the core grit of what makes Cuny so great. Is the essence of New York. This is what we do. We grind, we rise above, and we push forward.
Thank you. So Steve, and then I have a couple more questions.
Just quickly, I want to say that this whole issue of coalition building, I think what we need to think about is to broaden the idea of coalitions beyond organizational coalitions in the formal sense, as important as those are. Andrea spoke about many of them, and realize that Cuny will succeed in direct proportion to its ability to link to the communities in which the campuses are based. Think about what happened at City College in 1969. One of the reasons I put that in my presentation. They wanted, symbolically, but also in a very practical sense, to rename City College University of Harlem. And that sort of notion of connection to community, as well as the institutional and organizational building that we need to do, is fundamental. That's what allowed me to shift slightly to the Chicago Teachers Union, why it was successful in its 2012 strike, because it wasn't just teachers on the picket lines, it was their students and their community members who were there supporting those. We need the same kind of elan, we need the same kind of passion from our communities in support of Cuny, and that flows both ways. So coalition building has to be a much broader notion of what we need to do.
Thank you. Okay, so these are 3 more questions that have come in, and they're coming from multiple directions. So this is now coming in over my phone because our chat wasn't working. Andrea, can you just give me a second to answer this question, and then, to ask these questions?
Oh, I was going to speak to what Steve said for a second, if that's okay.
Sure, very, very quickly, yes.
Okay, so I agree, Steve. I mean, I think, the Chicago, of course, was K-12, and they are so neighborhood based, right? I mean, not many students live near BMCC, I don't think, right? So it's different, but I totally agree with you. And one of the reasons, even in this crisis, we were thinking of doing caravans through the communities around the schools, like Hostos, or not, maybe BMCC wouldn't make sense to have a caravan, but a Brooklyn caravan that even traveled from school to school in Brooklyn, and a Bronx caravan that went from Lehman to BCC to there. So I agree with you. I think we have to do it differently, though, in higher ed.
Thank you. So 3 more questions. One, very concretely, what can we do about and to stop and to fight for people who are very likely to lose their jobs at the end of this month from Cuny, because there are a bunch of reappointment notices that could be, come out with non-reappointments in the next 2 weeks. So specific to that. The next question comes from a professor at City Tech and an alumni leader at Hunter. She says, a huge number of CUNY faculty and professional staff are also CUNY alumni, some in organized alumni associations and some not. What do the members of the panel advise for alumni who want to be effective in this struggle? And the next question comes from a Baruch faculty member. Professor Breyer mentioned the shifts in culturally sensitive and more expansive curricula tied to the open admissions movement of the 60s and 70s, and I think you were just speaking to that. I believe some CUNY departments of Black and Latino departments started at that time, as you just spoke to. I'm concerned about what seems to be the starving of these departments and their students now. What would any of the speakers have to say about the health and future of CUNY's Black and Latinx departments? So I take, you all can take those questions up in turn. Whoever wants to come in, you can.
I kind of wanted to jump in about a slightly different question that was asked in the chat, talking about libraries.
Yeah.
I didn't,
Good.
I didn't see what your shirt says, Justin.
It says, oh, hold on, let's see if I can, let's see. Libraries make New York City stronger. So the question was, just for everyone to see if I can find it. It is from Beth. And she asks, CUNY librarians made great gains in recent contracts but are now under the gun with reopening. Any special thoughts on CUNY libraries? That people need to know more about libraries. So libraries hold a very near and dear place to my heart. So my mom had me when she was 18 years old in the South Bronx. We didn't grow up with a lot of money at all. We grew up very poor. But even through that, libraries were our escape. She used to bring us from library to library to library and picking up different books and trying to find the best ones. But even more important than that, when I was studying for the specialized high school exam, and I was fortunate enough to go to Bronx Science, one of the few Bronxites at Bronx Science. There was like 3 of us. But in order to study for that exam, we used to go from the library to library to library to pick up the practice books. They could have been from years ago, but the ones that didn't have as much writing in them, so I can try to practice as much as I could, because we couldn't afford the actual like test prep books. We couldn't afford tutors. And so I spent the entire summer studying before then. So for me, libraries, and I think for CUNY in general and for the CUNY students, honestly, I can't wait to get out of quarantine so I can go back to the libraries to do my work. I'm also now in summer classes, so I miss the library very, very much. And I think that is one of the things that is most important for us to really hone in on, is that when we're cutting the CUNY budget, we're also cutting the access for a lot of students to be able to have a space of solitude, to be able to study and have Wi-Fi and have access to things that a lot of people don't talk about, but they don't have at home. If you look at a lot of statistics, I mean, 25% of the South Bronx doesn't even have Wi-Fi. So then how are our students supposed to be doing work if we don't have access to libraries? If we don't have access to getting our books because we can't afford them, but they're at the library at the university? And I think one of those are things that really need to be put up to the forefront, that, you know, libraries are super important. So those are my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I am now looking at the time and realizing we really only have 5 minutes left. So I am asking, I have really enjoyed this conversation so far, and I hope our audience is as well, and thinking about all the things we can be doing. But I asked a bunch of questions. I hope that maybe in kind of closing remarks, some of those questions could be addressed, because I'm sure our audience would appreciate it. But I think we are going to be moving to closing comments from each of you. So I don't know who wants to start.
Well, let me start. Because I think you asked the question about people losing their jobs now. And obviously that has been a key part of our battle in the last month, and it will continue to be so. We don't accept layoffs. We are not, we are saying there should be no cuts and no layoffs. And as I mentioned, we're doing a lot of actions. We just heard Executive Vice Chancellor Cruz yesterday say that enrollment has gone way up for the summer. And yet, and there's also been contradictory statements about what they anticipate for the fall, but they really have no idea what the fall will look like. Adjunct labor, of course, and the structure of adjunct labor is the horrendous system that they've relied on for so long. It's contingent. People are constantly coming on and off payroll. This is a particularly horrible time to throw people off payroll, especially the thousands who are getting medical insurance through that. So both in face-to-face negotiations with Cuny, in our actions in the streets, and looking at the data that they're throwing out, it makes no sense for them to be laying off people now. There are tons of people who are going to be going back to school. There are going to be tons of people who would have paid for private or state universities who will now stay in the city. If you're going to sit in your living room and do your work, you might as well go to Cuny. Many people are feeling that way. So I think we really have to keep fighting and showing that there is no reason to have layoffs right now and do everything we can to stop them.
Thanks. Steve.
So I was going to make exactly the same point that Andrea made just so well and so passionately. We've got to support our colleagues, contingent and otherwise, in whatever way we can. If they get laid off, we've got to virtually or literally be out in the streets to fight those kinds of layoffs. It's essential. And, as someone who works at the Graduate Center, many of those students are graduate students, doctoral students who are struggling to complete their degrees. And they can't do it without some level of employment at Cuny. That seems essential to me. I do want to address that issue, the starving of ethnics and Black Studies program. I think that's a really important issue for us to focus on, that we can't simply just talk about issues of employment, as central as those are. We have to talk about issues of curriculum. And one of Cuny's greatest contributions has been to really argue for and institutionalize culturally responsive pedagogy and teaching in Cuny, starting with Black and Puerto Rican studies programs, extending to women and gay studies programs just a few years later in the early 1970s. We cannot let those programs go in the sort of drive that so many people are doing to say, let's stay focused on STEM, teaching and jobs. We can't do that. That will eviscerate it. It'll gut the very quality that Cuny has always had over the past 50 years. We've got to make sure that we defend those programs moving forward.
Thanks, Steve. Jamel, do you have any closing things? I know Andrea has one other thing she wants to say.
Yeah.
So Jamel.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, Andrea, do you want to say this last thing before? Yeah.
Because this is so important to so many members, and I saw it in the chat, the issue of returning to work at this moment, and the way Cuny has behaved, bringing us off campus, gave us little confidence in their ability to bring us back to campus safely. And the union's been very involved with this, and we've heard passionately and frighteningly from so many members, including college lab technicians, who may be called back even earlier to open science labs, because our students need to do experiments and research if they're going to graduate. So again, it's this tension of how to serve our students in the ways we want to, but not risking our lives, right? So that is something that the PSC has been on and our members have been on. That's how it's coming up immediately. But of course, later in the summer or the fall or whenever we hit what they're calling phase 4, we really have to be there, and we will not go to work and risk our lives. We can't be expected to do that if we can't get to work safely and be in a guaranteed safe surrounding when we get to work. I don't think our students would want us there on those conditions, and we can't do that to our families and our communities. So I just want to say we'll need everyone's support on that one.
Thanks. Jamel.
Yes, no, definitely. Hashtag sanitize Cuny has been something we've been pushing because we want to make sure all of our students and faculty are safe. To add on to my good colleague Steve, what was saying, this situation, if anybody watched Game of Thrones, I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. There is a scene where Queen Cersei got caught, and she got caught by this group called the Sons of the Sparrow, High Sparrow. And there was a woman that walked in the room, and she just said one word: confess. And Queen Cersei would say all this extra stuff. She would say confess. She would say all this extra stuff, and then as soon as she doesn't realize she doesn't confess, she'll just dump the water and walk out the room. She would do this every day until the person gets to the point. That scenario is what the United States is going through. New York City, so many countries are going through. That we want the country to confess a sin, accept the fact that this country was built on the sacrificial bodies and ancestral planes of so many people that look like me, that are from Puerto Rico, all these countries that pretty much took full advantage of us, right? And so educational studies, like what Professor Breyer and Andrea is saying, is so important. Right now, Netflix, Hulu, they're all streaming powerful documentaries to give the country the opportunity to understand the struggles of the Black community. We need to take that to the road on our end by sharing that real struggle right here in New York City through Cuny. And so my call is that I want professors to join us. We got to work together. We got to teach, right? The same way Netflix and them are telling the country the sin, we need to expose the sin of what happened here in New York City, because we see that even now, in the midst of everything that's going on, we still have a mayoral leadership that doesn't care. We still have a governor that doesn't care. And they're still working on imagining what this university will look like without our input. So we, the people, have to tell our story. We, the people, have to share and teach the sins of what was going on. So as long as we're doing that, and we standing with each other, we will win this battle. This is only day 16 of the new beginning. It won't end. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamel. Justin, if you have any last things you want to share, and maybe any ideas about alumni organizing.
Sure. First thing I want to say is please, if you haven't, fill out the census. It's how we're going to get a lot of federal dollars. Please tell your friends, your family, make everyone do it. But after that, what I really just want to say is, like, for everyone who's still on the call and all the panelists, like, thank you for allowing me to share the stories of my classmates and really like trying to get an understanding of what our students go through. But I mean, we've had so much to say already. I think, what I believe is call the elected officials, call Deborah Glick, chair of the Higher Education Committee, call folks that have seats in the rooms of power and hold them accountable. They work for us. They work for us. We put them in those jobs. We can take them out if they don't want to work for us. But having said that, in closing, what I've been thinking about a lot lately through all of this is the motto of our state is Excelsior. It means ever upward. And I feel like everyone on this call, every one of the panelists are continually striving to be better, to make sure that we're helping our students and helping our classmates reach for that ever upward. And I think it's time for New York State to start living up to its own motto and be the Excelsior state that we are. And that's what I think we really need to do. Let's be New Yorkers. Let's fight to be ever upward.
Justin, Jamel, Andrea, Steve, I just want to thank you all so much personally, and also on behalf of everybody who's listening. You guys were all fantastic. You are moving me into deeper commitment to my own actions in support of CUNY. And as I am saying goodbye to everybody, you can all look on our website. The screen should be in front of you now. That shows a lot of the things that were mentioned inside of this talk and a lot of action steps that we can start to take individually. I hope you get involved with CUNY Rising, you get involved in your student governments, you get involved in the Professional Staff Congress, you connect the coalitions that you work with and the community groups that you work with now to the fight for CUNY, and we will be there for you as well. So ever upward, and go CSI. And thanks to everybody for a great morning.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.